Hey, Battletech fans, I got to thinking over the last week or so about another conversation I wanted to have with you folks, the gaming community, and the Battletech fans out there. And the question that I'm thinking of is about custom mechs. Do you play with custom mechs? How do you use or allow or integrate custom mechs into your Battletech gaming group and your Battletech gaming sessions? When I say custom mechs, I mean not mechs that were built or provided in the technical readout or the TRO manuals, or the very specific kind of canonical battle mechs that you can find out there on master unit lists and whatnot. I'm talking about mechs that you create using the mech creation rules and playing those in your Battletech games. And kind of a question of, do you do that? And if so, how do you do that? And kind of the whole surrounding questions around that. So before we get any further, if you're new to Battletech, yes, indeed, you're not only limited to, I say limited because that's a funny word to use, the word limited in Battletech. There are literally hundreds, I don't know if there's thousands, but there's hundreds of battle mechs and variants that you can pick from. I guess if you include variants, you're probably talking thousands. But between all the timelines and all the standard mechs and their variants um, and whatnot, there's just an embarrassment of riches of mechs to play with that are kind of official canonical mechs. Now, you can, if you're new to BattleTech, you might not know, but now you do, that you can there are rules since kind of the very beginning to go build your own battle mech. So the mechs that you play in the game have a algorithm or a set of rules that they use to make those mechs, and you can do the same thing. You can make your own mechs from scratch on paper. And so there's lots of resources you can use to do this. And I know as part of the Kickstarter, there's going to be an app, or I believe there will be an app in progress soon if it's not already started, to build your own battle mechs. But if you don't want to wait for that, or if you don't want to use some of these other online resources that I'm going to mention here in a moment, you can go full analog and go into the Battletech tech manual rules, and you can just build your own mechs. So you just bust out the paper and pencils or your blank mech sheet or whatever, and you can go full iron sights on that thing and just bang out an old a mech, a custom mech, kind of old school. And then, like I said, there's rules for the creation of these guys, so you can do that. There's also, and I'm not going to go into the details here, but just know that that's a resource for you. It's not in the beginner box or the A Game of Armored Combat. It's not even in Total Warfare. I believe that's one's in the BattleTech Tech Manual rules. So you'll have to go find that to get those mech creation rules. So if you don't want to do that, and if you're like me and you like the simple life and you like things to be simpler, there's some free resources online that you can use in the interim. Now, I actually haven't used, I've tried these to kind of test them out for this conversation, so I kind of a little bit knew what I was talking about, but I haven't used these in a whole lot of detail, but I do know that they're out there. I do know that you can use them, and I just want to share some of these resources for creating your own custom mechs. Now, little caveat here, I'm not affiliated with these guys in any way, and with just like with any other third-party piece of software, not created by the game developer. I'm thinking like Battlescribe for your Warhammer 40K, lists. So, sometimes the rules entered into Battlescribe are not 100% correct and up to date. And so just like that, I'm not saying that these resources below have some of these problems, but it's just like any other third-party software. You have to be a little bit careful uh, with regards to whether or not the rules are up to date and 100% correct. Now, I think for the most part with Battletech, Battletech has been around for a good long time. The rules haven't changed dramatically in that time. So I think it's been out there long enough to where you're probably not likely to see a whole lot of issues still out there. I'm sure they've hammered out all the kinks in most of these apps for the most part. But again, caveat emptor, buyer beware. I just kind of go into that knowing. So a couple of things that are out there that you can take a look at. There's a program from a group called Solaris Skunkworks. They create a game called MegaMek, which is basically BattleTech, kind of a simulator, but they also create this thing called the MegaMekLab, which is basically a lab, which is basically an app where you can download it and you can run it. I believe it's a Java app where you can just basically use the same customization and creation rules for making BattleTech. I'm going to show you a couple screens here, like it's from MegaMek. You can go in there, you can kind of set up the mech the way you want. You can kind of set the movement and the armor and the and all that jazz. You can set up the weapons and the jump jets and all those other good things. You can basically kind of make this mech and you can kind of save it and print it and whatnot. So that's called Mega Mech Lab, one word. And you can download that. I'll put some links here in the show notes, and you can kind of go take a look at that. Another one that I found on the internet was a web-based app, which is called Remlab. Now, I wasn't really super familiar with this until just recently, but evidently this is out there, and it's very much similar. Like you can just kind of pop open a web page. You can go through the same sort of um, rubric here, kind of going through, pick your tonnage, pick your armor, pick your movement, pick your jump jets, pick your weapons and allocate your critical slots and all that good stuff. There's a lot of stuff you can do. It just the same as the MegaMekLab, the download thing, but it's out on a web page. It's really cool. So there's another thing out there called the Mech Factory mobile app. I don't know a whole lot about much about that, but it looks like it does the same thing. Bottom line, you are spoiled for choice. There are resources out there for you to create custom mechs to your heart's content. You just knock yourself out, make as many custom mechs as you want, save them, print them up, you're all good. So that's all well and good. You can go analog, you can go to digital route, and you can kind of make your mechs. But the real question that I want to have a conversation about is, do you? We've got all this power, but with great power comes responsibility. It's like you've got all these abilities to make these things, but do you actually use custom mechs in your games? And that seems like a very simple question to begin with, but I have some thoughts on this that kind of I'd love to get your perspective on. So some thoughts. Number one, when you have a mech, like a stock mech, like a Thunderbolt, TDR-1S, if you mod that mech, you can like swap out one of the medium lasers for small laser, let's say. That's a dumb mod, but let's say you could do that, right? Or you could take off the machine guns and add extra armor. To me, that's not so much a custom mech as a mod of a mech. So as a mod of a mech, you can kind of swap armor or swap weapons for armor or vice versa, add a couple of heat sinks. To me, that's one layer of question, right? You go from canonical stock variants and stock originals and variants, right, that are published. Maybe published is a better word. Published variants of a mech, and then mods. Do you take mods in your games? Like when you tweak a mod or when you tweak a battle mech, that becomes a mod to the kind of the standard published version. Do you do that in your games? If so, why? And then at some point, you can continue modding a mech and you keep modding it and keep modding it and keep modding it until it maybe even no longer even resembles the original thing that you were making. Like you took a Marauder, you took the arms and the PPCs off, you gave it hands, you gave it large lasers and 7 machine guns, you fully added all the armor up to the top, and you gave it jump jets. And you've got some, I don't know what you have there, but that is no longer a Marauder, right? But you took a Marauder chassis and modded it into something that's completely different. So there's that level of mod. So that's kind of second. Number two is like, okay, you got your factories, your factory defaults. You've got small mods like you swap out a weapon or two, weapon swap, right? Then you go full mod into an existing chassis, and what does that become? And do you play with those? And then I guess that's those are three, and I guess there's a fourth version of that where you just start something, create something custom from the ground up. So, question is, do you do any of those options in your games, and why or why not? I'm really curious to hear what you guys think. And so the things that kind of go through my head when I think about these options are, does it mess with the game balance? Like mechs out of the book have a story associated with them, and it's a narrative, right? There's a reason they built it that way, and it's maybe not 100% optimized, and there's a reason for that. And I think if you go over to listen to Wargamer Fritz, he has a lot of vlog podcasts that he talks about up on his YouTube channel. He talks about this a lot, and I agree with him in his thinking of do they made these mechs for a reason, and they made them with certain things in mind, and maybe they weren't good reasons, but they were made a certain way, and it really adds to the narrative. Like, hey, these mechs weren't meant to be the end all be all on the battlefield. Maybe they were just there to sell the great houses a mech that they maybe didn't 100% need, but that's going to supply these guys with income from spare parts and service agreements for decades, right? And so there's kind of a business narrative reason for them to do that. And Fritz goes into this in a lot of detail in several of his different podcasts, and I really love listening to his thinking on that. So go over there and check him out and kind of get a listen on that one. Um, so there's that. It's like, okay, well, if you tweak things, that's one thing. But if you're making something that's like ultimately perfect, how does that impact your narrative, or does it? And then if you impact or if you add the perfect mech into your campaign, how do you sort of approach that from a game balance perspective? Do you calculate the battle value and, hey, completely custom mechs that are 100% perfect in every way? That's fine as long as you're paying the battle value for it. Or what if you're not going by battle value and you're going by tonnage, or you're kind of making it a little bit more uneven, you know, uneven play style where, maybe one side's got a little bit more than the other, because in real life, I'm sure the battles are not always 100% even. So how does that affect the way that you approach this? And I think from my perspective, I guess where I'm sitting is I prefer playing with official mechs and official mech variants, because I think it's more fun to explore that shared universe with people that understand what these machines are. And let's face it, there's tons of mechs to explore in all the weight classes and time periods and configurations and variants. Like you are never gonna run out of options. I guess that's just my take. But something like a custom mech that's like a prototype, or it's a one of a kind, or some genius was spawning this in his lab and it's like, okay, well, he's way ahead of his time. I think there's narrative options for something like that, but I sort of feel like it just doesn't fit my mental narrative to have that as like a commonplace. These things are machines of, I guess where I'm really coming from is that these things are manufactured as machines of war. They're not custom rigs that people came up with. Like these came off of a factory assembly line and maybe they got tweaked, but we're not jousting with very special suits of armor. We're getting in a suit of armor that some factory made, right? And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. So above and beyond the how you philosophically approach doing custom mechs, I also sort of want to talk about, well, okay, let's say we've decided to make the plunge and we're going to go with that 100% from the ground up custom mech. How do you actually physically source the parts for the miniatures, and like how do in the real world, like the miniatures, not the actual mechs in the game, but the miniatures, like how do you source the parts for those? Like, do you build custom mechs, and if you do, how do you go about it? Do you take official existing models and kind of chop them up and repose and add some weapons, like kind of a kit bash? I know there's some games or some model kits out there that are sort of robot wars, quote unquote, that have the same scale or similar scales and have similar looks and whatnot that you could probably source and kind of like maybe like from the Robotech Kickstarter, maybe you take some of the legs or the torsos or the arms from some of those Robotech or Macross sort of designs and kind of kit bash them together to come up with something. I know that you could also go out on Shapeways or Thingiverse and find pieces, or you could design and print your own things on your 3D printer, and put them together as you see fit. But if you do go about I'm also very interested, if you do go about making your own custom mechs and you want to make a custom miniature for it, how do you go about that? It's like, full transparency, I have not done this yet. I'm not sure. It's not high on my list of things to do in my BattleTech hobby right now, and it's not because I don't think it's cool or anything. It's just like I've got so many lances that I want to paint up for different factions. Like I'm kind of focusing on that first, and maybe I explore making custom mods in some future hobby project, but I've not done anything like this for Battletech. And as a miniatures wargamer for a long time, and someone who's done a lot of kind of kit bashing and stuff, you go onto my blogger and my Facebook page, you'll see a lot of stuff that I used to do with 40K Nurgle and kind of custom sculpting and whatnot. It's like I don't think that that's missing in BattleTech. It's not something that I gravitate immediately to, because again, these are sort of military suits that were made, and that's more of a hard sci-fi approach as opposed to something a little bit more fantastic. But I'm open to it. It's like it's not like I'm avoiding it. It's just more like that's just not something I necessarily think about. But I wanted to explore the conversation with you. So I'm really interested in your thoughts. Do you do custom mechs? If so, how do you put them together? How do you justify them in your games? Do you have fun? I mean, at the end of the day, that's really what we're after, right? We're trying to have fun with our big stumpy robots that are in miniature size. So, how do you have custom fun with miniatures in your BattleTech games? Give me a comment. Let me know what you think.